Hi, my name is Rebecca Regnart. I am a chef in the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm a savory chef, but I do like to bake sometimes. And one of the things I really like to bake is sourdough breads from scratch. Right now, with the pandemic going on, it's been a little bit hard for people to buy breads in the store. A lot of people are not even wanting to go to the store at all to avoid any contact with anybody carrying the virus. So a lot of people are staying at home, making breads from scratch. And I just wanted to share the way that I do it. And maybe you can pick up some tips. Maybe you do it better than me. I don't know. But here we go. So the night before we have, this is my old, starter. And before you, make bread, you have to feed the starter and you have to let it, feed for about 8 hours before you mix your sourdough. So what we're going to do right now is, before I go to bed, I'm going to feed my sourdough starter. And what we're going to feed it with is water, organic bread flour, and whole wheat flour. So it's going to be 1 part water, 1 part flour. So we're going to weigh it out. So now we're going to, zero out our scale. So we have it in grams here. There's a unit button on most scales they have, which is in ounces as well. So we want not milliliters, not ounces or pounds, but grams. So we're on grams here, which is good. We're gonna make sure it's 0 with the bowl on. So we're gonna measure out 150 grams of room temperature water. Stop. A little over. Right on the money. And then I'm gonna 0 it out again. And I'm gonna go ahead and add 75 grams of unbleached organic bread flour. It's close enough. We're going to add 75 grams of organic bread flour and 75 grams of whole wheat flour. We just want to get to 150 total. So it's 150 grams of water and 150 grams of flour total. So we have all of our flour, and we're gonna add a good spoonful of our old sourdough starter, and we're gonna mix it all together. You can use a larger bowl if you want. I always just use this tiny bowl and try and keep it all in the bowl as I stir. And what you're trying to do here really is just incorporate all the dry ingredients into the wet so that you don't have any masses of dry ingredients like that. And once you have all of the flour mixed in with the water, and you don't see any lumps of flour, then you're good. And then when that happens, and you are good, you can just scrape all of the sides. And what I do is I just use my finger to scrape what's on the spoon off. And at this point, what you want to do is to take a clean kitchen towel and cover it like this and just stick it in a place that's draft-free. I usually just put mine on my stove overnight, and so in the morning it's ready to go. Good morning. So I'm here this morning to show you what to do next after you have your sourdough starter fed. We fed the starter last night, and this morning we're going to be mixing the bread and eventually later baking the bread. We're going to be making 2 loaves of bread today. The book that I learned how to make bread with is called Tartine Bread. Tartine is a pretty well-known bakery in San Francisco. And they've kind of, in the past few years, expanded to opening restaurants in LA and San Francisco. And their bread is amazing. So if you ever have a chance to go there and pick up a loaf, it's worth the wait. So we're going to be measuring out enough ingredients today to make 2 loaves of bread, as I said. And we're going to be working out of the Tartine bread book to do that. The recipe for the sourdough bread in the Tartine bread book is enough for 4 loaves of bread. So we're basically going to be cutting the recipe in half, which is what I usually do. So we're going to measure out 350 grams of water. This water is about 80 degrees, which is a little bit warmer than room temperature. Water there. And we're going to take 100 grams of our leaven that we fed. I'm going to zero out the scale. And we're going to add it to the water. And as you can see, the leaven is floating around in there. It isn't sinking to the bottom, which is what you want. If the leaven sinks to the bottom, it is not ready to mix yet, and you need to let it sit for a little bit longer. This is perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and mix it into the water to dissolve. And you're just trying to break up any clumps as you do this. I'm going to go clockwise, counterclockwise to do that. That looks pretty good. So now we're going to go ahead and zero out our scale again and measure the flour. I'm using organic bread flour. I really like the King Arthur brand bread flour. You really just want to look for a bread flour that has a high protein content in it because it will allow you for a nice chewier style of bread. And there's something called the hydration percentage with bread, and the hydration percentage is basically the amount of water relative to the flour. So the more flour you have in your bread, it lowers the hydration percentage. So you can go ahead and play around with that once you get comfortable, but the bread we're going to make today is basically a 75% hydration level. We are going to use 450 grams of white bread flour and 50 grams of whole wheat flour. So at this point, we're ready to stir. At first, I like to use a spoon to sort of incorporate the dry with the wet. And then eventually I'm just going to shift to sticking my hand in there and mixing it to make sure I have it all mixed really well. At this point, I'm going to wet my hand, warm water, so that the dough doesn't stick too much. I'm just going to go in there, and what I like to do is sort of squeeze my hand and then turn the dough. And this is pretty good. Scraper, get my fingers clean, clean the bowl. And we're gonna go do something else for about 20 minutes and then come back and add the salt and the rest of the water. It's been about 20 to 30 minutes. I was able to finish my cup of coffee, and now we're going to be adding the rest of the flour and adding some salt to the dough. So we have our scale here. Just gonna zero it out again. So we're gonna be adding 25 grams of water. Close enough.
Perfect.
And we're gonna be adding 10 grams of kosher salt. I'm gonna swirl it around to mix it up. And we're gonna go ahead and take it and dump it into our dough. I'm gonna wet my hand real quick. I always like to use warm water when I'm doing this. I'm just gonna incorporate that salt and water into the rest of our dough. You don't have to be too gentle when you're doing this. You can kind of get in there with your hands and kind of squeeze it in there. And so just to reiterate, we're doing a 75% hydration. So our total water is the 350 grams we originally had plus the 25 grams. And our total flour is 500 grams of flour. So we did 450 grams of organic bread flour and 50 grams of wheat flour. So the 350 plus 70 plus 25 is 375. Divided by 500 is a 75% hydration level. So at this point, our dough is going to be, I transferred it into a plastic Cambro, and you can just keep it in the bowl. If you don't have one of these, it'll be fine. But I like to transfer my dough into this kind of container to allow it to do the bulk fermentation. So what I'm going to do is put this dough into back onto the stove where it sat overnight, and it's gonna do the rest of it there. So our bread has already been mixed, and we're waiting to do the first turn. I've just cleaned off the counter, and we have the rest of the sourdough starter. I just wanted to kind of talk about it a little bit. A lot of people are afraid to do sourdough breads because they think their sourdough starter, they are going to have to feed it every single day, which is not true. You only have to feed your sourdough starter when you're going to be making bread. So unless you're making bread every single day, you don't need to feed it every single day. What we're going to do is put it into a clean jar for our future loaves. Ooh. And it must have been in there. This can just go in the refrigerator, and it can just sit in the refrigerator for 2 or 3 weeks. You don't really have to feed it in between that time. There's times where I've just gone on vacation and come back and fed it, and it's totally fine. So as long as you feed it, I would say once every 2 to 3 weeks, you should be good to go. So we're back now. It's been about 30 minutes since we mixed our dough, added the salt and water, and let it go into bulk fermentation. The total time of bulk fermentation is 3 to 4 hours. The first 2 hours, every 30 minutes, we're going to do what's called a turn of the dough. So we're going to start now. It's been about 30 minutes, like I said, since we put the dough into bulk fermentation, so it's time for its first turn. I have some warm water here. It's about 80 degrees. Just gonna dip my hand in the warm water, shake my hand off, let it dry, and then I'm gonna dip my hand in the dough, pull up, and then push down. Turn it, pull up, push down, turn it. Do this about 3 times, and this is my first turn. The first turn you can be a little more aggressive with the dough, but subsequent turns you want to be gentle. And like I said, we're just going to leave our dough at room temperature because it's pretty warm today, and if it was a cooler winter day, we would probably want to find a warmer environment, like perhaps inside the stove. But because it's warm today, we can just leave it out at room temperature. So we are 2 hours into the bulk fermentation. We've done 4 turns of the dough. And as you can see, the dough's volume has increased significantly. I would say probably 30% to this morning when we first mixed it. So what I'm going to do, I have some bench flour here, which is just bread flour. I'm going to take the dough out. What I'm going to do is divide it into 2 as evenly as I can. You can use a scale to do this if you want, or you can just do it by eye. I usually just do it by eye. Divide it in half. And then what I'm going to do is sort of form it into 2 round shaped balls. And I'm going to try and make the dough a little bit tight as I'm forming it into a ball. I'm just sort of pulling it and folding it under so that it's nice and taut. So that's my first one. Make sure there's flour below it so it doesn't stick. I'm going to do my second one. So just like pulling the dough and folding it on top, adding some flour. It's a bit sticky, as you can tell. And forming it to the second one. At this point, we need to let it do its bench rest for about 30 minutes. So we'll come back in about that 30 minutes and we'll show you how to form it into final shaping for the basket, for the final fruit. Okay, so we're back. We have divided our dough in 2, and they sort of flattened out a little bit as they've been resting for about 30 minutes here. And the next step is to shape the bread loaves and do the second rise in the bread baskets before we bake them, which is going to be 2 hours additional. So I have a bread basket here, which unfortunately my bunny chewed a little bit, but it still works just fine. If you don't have a bread basket, you could also use a round bowl. It will work just fine, and I'll show you how to do that. So what I'm going to do is take the dough, flip it over, and stretch it both ways, and fold it 1 and 1. And then take it other way, stretch it 1 and 1. And then at this point, what I'm going to do is just fold it to shape it into sort of an oval so that it will fit into the basket. And the basket, what I like to use is rice flour to line it with. The Tartine bread book says to use bread flour and whole wheat flour, 50-50. But I like to just use rice flour because I feel like it does a great job, and it's not as difficult to have to blend. So I prefer the rice flour over that. So we have one. And then the second one that I'm going to do is kind of something different. I'd like to show you how to use flax seeds. I just have some organic grown flax seeds here to do a nice crust on the outside. I put some in the bowl here. And I'm going to do the same thing. What you want to do now is not incorporate too much more flour when you're shaping the loaves. It should have enough flour as it is. So what I'm doing is this is going to be a round shape. And I'm going to take it and roll it in the brown flax seeds. And to line this makeshift basket here, I'm going to also use rice flour, and I'm going to use a little tea towel here and just dust it with the rice flour so that it doesn't stick. And seam side is always going to be up, because when you bake it, you're going to flip it over and you don't want to see the seam side. So the presentation side is always going to be down. So I'm just going to transfer it into this bowl here. And we're going to put them in a nice warm place, covered with another tea towel, and then we'll be back in 2 hours to do the baking. So as you can see, the bread's kind of risen up a little bit. It's nice and loose. There's bubbles here. It's really active, which is a good sign. And it's been a couple hours, so I'm gonna go ahead and open the oven. I have my Dutch oven in here. I have a Le Creuset nice big Dutch oven in here that's been heating up for about 30 minutes at 500 Fahrenheit. I'm gonna pick it and sort of pop it out. Got stuck a little bit, but it's gonna be fine. I'm gonna take my razor blade and just score the top. You can buy specifically for bread blades online. They're called scoring lanes, but I'm just using a regular razor blade from the store. Put the lid back on, slide it in. It's gonna stay covered, baked for about 30 minutes, at which point we're gonna take the lid off, drop the temperature to 450, and then finish it off. Here we go. We're gonna take the lid off. It's been about 30 minutes since our bread's been baking. Let's take a look and see how it goes. It's a very exciting part. Ooh, it looks great. We're gonna lower the temperature to 450 Fahrenheit, and we're gonna continue baking it a little bit longer. That looks great. Put back in, and we'll check it again. We want it to be a nice dark brown color. We'll check it again in about 15 minutes and see if it's ready to come out. Okay, so it's been about 15-20 minutes since we've taken the lid off. A nice golden brown crust on the bread. I'm gonna take a look. Looks good. It's really hot, so be careful taking it out. And that's it. We're just gonna let it cool in the Dutch oven for about an hour before we slice into it. And that's it. I hope you like this video, and see you later.